So my name's Michael De Plata, and I'm the design director at Monolith, working on Shadow of Mordor. So where we sort of work very, very hard to stay authentic to the canon, so to what's known about the lore at that time. But also there's a lot of spaces in between that, a lot of mysteries. You know, it's a 60-year period of history. And going in between The Hobbit and Lord of the Rings really lets us draw on both of those stories and sort of the connections between them. So I think we had a lot of freedom, and in particular, something we wanted to do that is actually, if you look at The Hobbit, it's a fantastic standalone story, even though it's got a lot of connections to Lord of the Rings. And of course, if you look at Lord of the Rings, it's a fantastic standalone story, whether or not you've read The Hobbit. And we really tried to follow that model of making something that's a great standalone story with its own characters, but also with connections to the larger world of Middle-earth as well. So really with our hero, our main character, there really are two characters there. There's Talion himself and there's the Wraith. I think if any individual is an inspiration for Talion, it's Boromir. And in particular, it's Boromir at the Council of Elrond, where they have the Ring of Power, and Boromir is very much, you know, his idea is we should use the weapon of the enemy against him. The only way to battle against Sauron is with equal ruthlessness, you know, and actually taking the fight to him. So I think that was very much a starting point for the type of story that we wanted to explore. But then also we wanted Talion to be a unique character, and I think what differentiates him from Aragorn or Faramir or Boromir or Eomer is he's not of royal blood. This is not someone who is actually part of a dynasty. He's not in line for the throne. He really is more of a typical Gondorian soldier that's been posted, you know, to the sort of frontiers of the kingdom. And then with the other half of our character, with the Wraith, I think probably the biggest single inspiration in terms of the power of that character and what power means is Galadriel. So is when Frodo offers the ring to Galadriel, and we get that vision of what would have happened if she would have taken the ring, and she says, you know, I would take this out of a desire to do good, but the result would be, instead of having a Dark Lord, you would have a Dark Queen. So again, another example, like Boromir, of what it means to fight evil, you know, fight force with force, and the representation of that kind of power. I guess the details of the reason of what happened is something we want to explore through the course of the story, and the kind of revelations, and it's very much tied to the Wraith has a very personal history with Sauron, and the Wraith is extremely powerful as well, and is very tied into kind of the lore of Middle-earth. But the Wraith, in order to come back, required a host, or required a vessel, in order to, you know, pursue Sauron and in order to go back. So it's not clear, certainly at this stage of the story, whether that was deliberate or whether it was, you know, was Talion deliberately selected? Is he in some way destined to be this character, or was it really in some ways more of just an arbitrary selection? It actually could have been anyone, and it was just purely tragedy that resulted in him being the one who was selected. I think it's one of the elements that is most unique to our game, is that ability to really craft and create your own personal enemies with the Nemesis system. But in the context of the overall game, it is very much just one element, you know, between the story missions and the exploration and the side missions and the other characters that you'll meet and the boss fights and so on. So it is only one part of the overall experience, but it possibly is the most innovative or distinctive part to our game. No, that's permanent. Once you dominate, once you break the will of one of the Uruk captains, that's permanent until they die. But the problem is, or the challenge is, that they're constantly battling against each other. They're constantly going on other missions. So he can die or be replaced at any time. So the world really is always, you know, alive in that way. I guess the high level story, of Talion's story, of the reveal of who the Wraith is, and the overarching story. That will stay the same, but the encounters and some of the missions, and especially who your ultimate nemesis is, your final boss, that will vary depending on each player's playthrough. So the combat itself, the core controls of the combat, we obviously wanted something that was very, very visceral and very close to what we see in Tolkien's work. So, but the foundations of the basic controls, we also want people to be able to pick up and play the game immediately. And Arkham was absolutely the best third-person melee combat, so we took that as our foundation, but then we really developed it from there to take advantage of the weapons, of the powers, of how it works together with the Wraith abilities. The thing I really like, I think's worked out really well in our game, is the way that stealth combat, so being able to sneak around, ambush your enemies, melee combat, so with the sword, and ranged combat, the three of those really do integrate together very seamlessly and kind of flow into each other very seamlessly. So you can use your ranged during the midst of combat. If you enter combat from stealth, we have types of stealth kills that will let you build up your hit counter as you enter combat and terrify your enemies. So we really, I think, the thing that's very unique to the flavour of our game is the way the different combat systems of melee, range, stealth flow so nicely into each other. Oh no, I mean, as soon as anyone, well, it's not, I don't think it's, I mean, the closest analogies for any of the, I guess, beginning inspirations for our stealth or for our combat, any of our core mechanics, were Batman at the beginning, and then we've sort of evolved from there. But we're definitely a third-person, open-world action game, so between all of them, there end up being some convergence to common elements, I think. Also, we had the first region of the game that we showed, which was Udun, and then this is the second region we've revealed, which is the Sea of Nirn, and we've sort of got more to come, but we haven't sort of, I guess, revealed the total size of the game world. The thing is, it's absolutely, like, it's not Skyrim, we've designed the game to be, I guess, relatively concentrated. Like, it's not a game about traveling on foot a long way from A to B. We want a real density of opportunities and gameplay, and to have surprises around every corner because of the way the living world works. So nighttime and daytime play very differently. You're constantly getting surprised by your enemies. So it's definitely a focus on the density and the variety over the just total size. Yeah, so the ones that we've announced so far, there's Gollum. He plays a key role in the story, and he's in Mordor at this time. And the other one I think we're really excited about exploring more and developing more as a character is Sauron as well, as the villain, and actually getting to see more of his motivation and more of him as a character. We do have some other characters as well, some that are more familiar, others that are kind of from deeper within the lore, but actually play a really key part in the lore and the backstory of Middle-earth. So yeah, well, certainly as we're revealing more of the story down the track, there'll be more of those. Also, in the main narrative of Lord of the Rings, he pretty much is just become the personification of evil, but through the appendices and through the backstory, there's a lot more to his motivation than that. And he, even he isn't just a simple case of black and white, good and evil. He is someone who set out to do good. Like the rings of power that he crafted, the main thing that they do, one of their main powers is the power of preservation, of retaining life, of immortality, all things that in the beginning had a good purpose. So Sauron himself is the second Dark Lord of Mordor. He was the only one of those powers that was kind of left in Middle-earth after basically the rest of the gods had a war and left. And he didn't set out to do evil. He set out to save what was left and to preserve it, and also to move things forward into the future. So eventually it's obviously a story of the fall, and of his fall from grace and his failure to do that. But when he was crafting the Rings of Power, he was working with the elves on doing that. So even within the lore that's there is a lot more that does actually flesh him out as a character, but it's really interesting to get to explore that as well.